What's up, guys? Welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Riddell, and today we will be going over the Delayed Wing Gambit. This video might be useful for you e4 players who are trying to find a counter to the Sicilian defense. There are many different options that white can play here, including knight f3, knight c3, c3, d4, etc. I mean, there's a lot of different options here, but they all require a ton of opening theory. Like, I'm talking hundreds of hours potentially for some of the Sicilian responses, like the Najdorf, for example. And honestly, against all these moves, most Sicilian players are pretty prepared. So in this video, I will be teaching you guys the Delayed Wing Gambit, which starts off with the crazy looking move A3. Now, many of you are probably wondering what I am doing. I mean, this A3 move looks completely absurd. When I first saw this move, I thought it was one of those dumb gambits that doesn't work against good players, and that is based on small and cheap threats. But as I've studied it more, white can have huge payoffs if the gambit is accepted. This is a very aggressive opening, and part of what makes it so good is that most Sicilian players don't know how to respond. I myself have been up a rook by move 9 against 2,200 players. Magnus Carlsen has played it too, and if Carlsen is playing it, there has to be something about it that works. So in this video, I will go over the responses knight c6 and e6. Both of these accept the gambit, and I will also go over other popular moves that do not accept the gambit, such as d5, knight f6, and g6. Let's start off by going over knight c6. Knight c6 is probably the most common response that I see, and it makes a lot of sense. Black has a pawn on c5, and white plays a3, making it pretty obvious that b4 is coming. Why not put a knight on c6 and put an extra attacking piece on that square? But here is white. We gladly play b4 anyways and give up the pawn. And in doing so, by playing a3 and b4, a big part of the reason we do this is to distract the pawn on c5, and now we are able to play c3, and after knight c6, d4. And notice here how strong white's pawns are in the center of the board with e4, d4, and c3. Now in this position, the most common response for black is d5. Well, what's wrong with a move like d6? Well, after a move like d6, here white can continue to push with d5, and now black has a tough decision, bringing the knight back to b8 or playing knight e5. If knight b8, we can simply play bishop e3, develop our pieces. White has a huge advantage in space and development, and I give the edge to white here. The other option is to play knight e5, but here we can play f4, and after knight g6 and knight f3, again, white has an advantage in space, development, and coordination of the pieces. For example, this knight on g6 is pretty awkwardly placed and doesn't have a lot of freedom in scope. So after d4, d6 is probably not the best option. So here a lot of Sicilian players go for d5. And here what you have to remember is take the pawn on d5 and then play the crazy looking move knight a3. Knight a3 is a very strong move, and in doing so, we are wanting to bring the knight to b5, where it will attack the c7 square, and there's really not much black can do from stopping this. For example, even a6 doesn't work, because we still play knight b5, and this knight can't be taken, because then rook takes a8 enters the picture. We're attacking the bishop on c8, and white is completely winning this position. So after knight a3, a6 doesn't work. The most common move I see is knight f6. But this doesn't work either, as now we play knight b5 anyways, attacking c7. And after queen d8, now play d5. What is the idea here? Well, if knight e5, we have bishop f4, attacking the knight, and after knight fd7, we can play a move like queen e2. And here, white just has a very nice position, two pieces attacking the knight on e5. And if a move like knight g6 is played, we can play knight d6 checkmate. Game over. So knight e5 doesn't really work, and knight takes d5 doesn't work either, because now we take the knight, and now bring the knight to c7 with check, forking the king, rook, and queen. And after king d8, play knight takes d5. Here white is up material and is winning the game. So knight f6 isn't the best option. What about e5? I see this move a lot, and it makes sense. White just played knight a3. Why not try to break through in the center of the board? But here we can play knight b5, attacking c7. And after the move bishop d6, it appears, at least at first sight, that black is doing okay. But now we have bishop c4. Idea being, after queen takes c4, we take the bishop and take the queen on c4, completely winning the game. So the best move here for black is to play queen e4 check. But here we just continue to develop with knight e2, and after bishop b8, play queen b3. As you can see here, the queen and bishop are attacking this pawn on f7. So we see a move like queen g6. We just castle, and after knight ge7, or a move like that, we can now push with d5, kicking the knight back to d8. And now we have bishop a3. White has a very nice position here. An active bishop pair, active knight, strong queen, strong pawn on d5. We're eventually going to bring one of the rooks to d1 and just continue to push. I really like white's position here. So knight f6 and e5 aren't the best options, and a lot would argue that bishop d7 is the best move. But even after bishop d7, I still like white's game. After knight f3, and it really doesn't matter what black plays here. Let's just say a move like rook c8. We now push with c4. And white just has a very nice position here, good compensation for the pawn, a strong pawn on c4 and d4. And after a move like queen e4 check, we could play bishop e3. Idea being now we can bring the bishop to d3. We can also push with d5. This knight can always come to b5, etc. So that is knight c6. The move e6 is also a common response. And here we see the same idea, except the bishop is now attacking the b4 square. But again, we play b4 gladly, giving up the pawn, and here playing the move c3, kicking the bishop back to e7, and now playing d4. Again, as you can see, we have a pawn on c3, d4, and e4, taking control of the centers. And now there's really two ways for black to play. One is putting the pawn eventually on d6 or d5. After a move like d5, I recommend pushing with e5 and then just developing from there. We see after knight c6 and a move like bishop d3, followed by queen e2, we basically have a French defense, except now the pawn on c7 is gone, so it's not putting pressure on d4, and we also don't have a pawn on a2 or b2. And white has a lot of flexibility here. f4 is an option, followed by maybe f5. We can always develop. A lot of times what you see here is trading the bishops off and then kind of playing it like a reverse banco with the rook and then the other rook eventually coming to b1, putting pressure on the a and b files. So that covers the move d5. Push with e5, develop your pieces, and enjoy the space advantage. The other option here is d6, and I actually like this more for white. Here we can push with f4. f4 is not commonly played, but I really like this move, and as you can see, white just has a ton of space in the center of the board. And after knight c6, we can just play knight f3. And after knight f6, play bishop d3. There's no rush for us to push with the move e5. I mean, whenever black plays d5, we can then push with e5. And after knight d7, I really like white's position here. We can castle, we can play knight g5, we can even play f5 here. There's just a lot of attacking chances for white in this line. That covers e6. Another move commonly played is d5. And this doesn't accept the gambit. And here we see after e takes d5 and queen takes d5, we now play knight c3. And I've heard a lot of people tell me, look, this is like the Scandinavian, except white has wasted a move with playing a3. But I would like to disagree. Black also has a pawn on c5, not allowing the queen to come to that nice a5 square that it usually goes to in the Scandinavian defense, and is now forced back to d8. If it goes to any of the other squares like e5 or d6 or e6, white will just be able to easily attack the queen and gain even more development. And now we can just play knight f3, and after knight c6, play bishop b5, putting some pressure on this knight. And after a move like bishop d7, we can castle, play d4 next. This is a roughly even position, but I would give the slight edge to white. Another option is knight f6, but here we can push with e5, forcing the knight to d5, and now we break the center open with d4. We see c takes d4, and now queen takes d4. e6, defending the knight, and now that we pushed the knight to d5, we can now play c4. And if black plays this position perfectly, you'll see these two moves. Knight c6, which now we always want to bring our queen to e4 in this variation, and after f5, bringing the queen back to e2. Just remember that. After knight c6 and f5, we play queen e4 and queen e2. But here we see this knight on d5 is attacked, and after a move like knight d7, we can play b4, and I like white's position here, a strong pawn on e5 and a space advantage. So that covers knight f6. The last move we'll go over is g6. And I'm surprised that I haven't seen this more. I actually think g6 is black's strongest response to the delayed wing gambit. And here I'll show you guys two moves. There's h4 and there's b4. I personally prefer h4, but a lot of players like b4, so I'll show you that as well. Here with b4, we see bishop g7, attacking the rook on a1, so now we have to play knight c3. We see d6, and instead of taking this pawn on c5 right away, we can just play knight f3. And after knight c6, play rook b1. A lot of players like to push with the move b5, but I really don't like this move from a positional understanding, as now black can play knight d4. Black has a very strong bishop and knight in the center of the board, and we basically wasted two moves to make the knight a strong piece, and this pawn on b5 is just kind of standing there for no reason. So after knight c6, I like the move rook b1, supporting the pawn on b4, and now we can just keep developing, taking the pawn and then playing a move like bishop b5, attacking this knight on c6, and I think white is just fine here. So that covers the move b4, but I personally like the move h4. And with h4, what white is wanting to do is play h5. And if black lets white play h5, that is not good for black, as now this pawn can take on g6, and this rook on h1 becomes very active. So the most common move for black here is to play h5, preventing white from marching further. And now what we want to do is put our knight on c3 and bishop on c4, followed by playing pawn d3. And that's what we see here with knight c3. And after a move like bishop g7, we see bishop c4. And after knight c6, d3. Thanks for watching today's video. I know it was a longer one. This gambit is a great response to the Sicilian and is playable at all levels. I recommend watching this video a few times so you can really understand the moves, concepts, and ideas. Let me know what y'all thought of this opening, and I'm wishing you guys an amazing day. Love y'all. Thanks for watching today's video. If you'd like to watch another one, you can click or tap up here. And I've got a lot more high quality chess content on the way. So if you'd like to subscribe, you can click or tap down here. I really appreciate your support.